I'm talking today with Tom Gresham, host and creator of Gun Talk Radio. And this is a real privilege for me because this is a guy I really admire. Welcome to the network studio, Tom, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and your time with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure. And, you and I have known each other for a long, long time now.
Yes, well, I feel like it's a privilege. I can remember being parts of programs that you were filming, and you taught me stuff about presenting and how you were willing to kind of play the clown a little bit just to make a point. And you know what? I've used that. I've really used that.
It works.
But the thing, even going back to before you and I met, is you had been writing for the gun media before. I think it was the attacks on gun rights in 1994 that really propelled you into the bully pulpit that you occupy today, and really you've dominated gun talk on AM and FM radio since then. And while your show keeps us updated on what we really love, which is guns and shooting, you also do a really good job, and we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the way you inspire rank and file, everyday men and women to fight for liberty, to push back against government restrictions, and that's what I'd like to focus on today. I think that there's so much that we tend to forget, and you've got 30 years of promoting liberty on Gun Talk Radio, that I'm interested in that. It's almost an element of institutional memory, that especially our younger armed citizens today are people who may have come to it later in life, and they're focused and they're frightened by the incursions today, the legislation, and they've not been exposed to that history, and it may be easy to think, we're never going to win this.
Right.
And your history shows us that we can win. So in the mid-1990s, you were already writing for the magazines. Why did you branch out into broadcast media?
Well, I'd been doing TV as well, and I was co-hosting a show on ESPN with my dad, Grits, and it's called Chevy Truck Shooting Sports America. The first gun show on general media, on not ESPN2, it was actually ESPN. And I liked that. I found that I liked doing broadcast. And of course, I've been writing for 20 years. And then the opportunity popped up to do radio. And you got to remember the time period now. This was before really we had much in the way of internet. And we certainly did not have podcasts. The iPod had not been invented. And the general media was very much the same as it is right now. This was even before Fox News. So we really had no mass media way to get a message out, a positive message about guns, gun owners, or the Second Amendment. And I thought, well, talk radio's coming along. This fellow Rush Limbaugh is doing not too badly, so he kind of paved the way. And so we'd say, well, we'll give it a try. I figured it would last 6 to 10, 12 weeks. Now we just hit 30 years.
We did.
It's amazing. But, you make a good point, that at the time, we started the radio show in 95. In 94, they passed what I call the Clinton gun ban, the so-called assault weapons ban, and a ban on standard capacity magazines. All these phrases, I have come up with a lot of ways of describing things that people use a lot now. I think I was the first person to call them standard capacity instead of high capacity. Yes. You cannot let them define the language. And they've been very good at this, the gun banners have. They created Saturday Night Special, an assault weapon, and Ghost Gun, and High Capacity Magazine. And we are fools if we use those terms and let them define this, because to the general public, they hear assault weapon, and that sounds like a machine gun. They hear high capacity, well, that's more than you need, on and on and on. So they're very good at controlling the language, and we have to be pretty careful about that. But, to your point, 94 was a low time. They were passing gun control laws left and right. And honestly, and I like the way you put it, because people who are right now looking at this and thinking, boy, this is tough time. And I'm thinking, no, this is glorious times. Because we've seen tough times when, even as optimistic as I am, I thought this is only going to get worse and will never get better. And we are going to eventually lose our gun rights. It felt like that 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And now we're winning in the courts. We're losing some, but we're winning in the courts. My heavens, we have Donald Trump, who would have imagined that, second term in right now. Don't know what that's going to mean for the Department of Justice and ATF. We'll see what Pam Bondi really is going to do. We'll see. I guess the message would be it's a long-term constant thing that will be going for the rest of our lives. And there will be ups and downs, and there will be disappointments, and we're going to get some Supreme Court decisions that we hate and think, oh my God, how can we recover from this? But if you say, okay, this is not a this year or even this month, this is a 10-year or 20-year or 50-year plan, it really helps to settle in and go, okay, we took our lumps on this one, what's the next thing we have to do?
Well, and, before returning to the dirty business of politics, I'd like to highlight a thing that you did that was really my personal favorite, and that was the Truth Squad. And you know what? I don't hear so much about it anymore, but man, I love that. In fact, I quoted your foundational assertion that a lie left unchallenged becomes the truth when I was writing a video script to counter some lies that were being told about the network here a few months ago, because it's always stuck with me. But back to the Truth Squad. What was it? What did it accomplish? And I wonder if there's a version of that kind of thing that we could put to work today in our pro-liberty grassroots effort. It was wonderful.
It came out of the time where we were. And, well, let me back up, because there's a part of it that you don't even know.
Okay.
Before we even had the online part of everything, I wanted to get messages to legislators. And I was trying to figure out, how do I contact gun owners? And how do we get a message out? Because all we had was mail or putting it into a magazine, and we had a 3-month lead time to get something in a magazine. And my dad and I came up with this weird deal. I call it the mayonnaise jar method. And we took a great big jar, literally a mayonnaise jar, and we would put it on the counter of gun stores. And then we had to seed it. So I put $500 into the kitty, and we had postcards printed up, and prepaid, pre-stamped postcards. So you got to buy the card and you got to buy the stamp. Then we had to print them with a message of this particular bill and addressed to your congressman. And we put the cards on the counters at gun stores. And we said, these are free. You just fill it out with your congressman's name and say, I oppose this. I want you to oppose this bill. It's already stamped. Sign your name to it, and the gun store will mail it. And oh yeah, that jar over there, that mayonnaise jar, that's for contributions. If you want to drop $1 in it or $5 or $20 in it to help us pay for this, that's our outreach program. And it was as crude as you can imagine. But we got a lot of postcards sent into people. And we made a difference. Well, then along comes the radio show, and I had this idea of, okay, wouldn't it be great if we could get people to counter the media message? Because they lie all the time. I mean, I've caught CNN making up quotes, and actually found the person they quoted at the ATF, because CNN said, well, this person at the ATF says that assault weapons are used in the majority of crimes and murders. And I knew it wasn't true. So I actually found the person that they quoted. And I called him and asked him about it. He said, well, I didn't say that. He says, not only that, I've never talked to anybody at CNN. They made it all up. They made up the quote. They made up the interview. They made up everything. And he said, and if they had talked to me, I would have told them the exact opposite, that these rifles are rarely used in crime. So there's the baseline. So I said, okay, how can we counter that? And I said, I would like to find 2 volunteers in each state. So I need 100 volunteers, because at the time, all we could do was get a letter to the editor in the newspapers. We had no way to do outreach, really before the internet really got going. And I said, we'll call it the Truth Squad. And I wanted to get 100 volunteers, people who would say, I will respond to these falsehoods, these lies. Well, we ended up getting, 20,000 people who said, yeah, count me in. I'm there. I will do this thing. Well, obviously, we're well beyond sending letters to the editor in newspapers. Yeah. Nobody's doing that. Yeah. But I like your idea of it's time to resurrect it and do something else with it. Well, part of it is now you can do it even easier just with comments, with responses online. And on X, formerly Twitter, we now have community notes. So when somebody lies about something, we have the ability for somebody to come in and answer and say, no, actually, this is what the Firearms Owner Protection Act says. And this is the actual law. And the things that you're saying are simply untrue. The problem is we need to get more of our people to be disciplined about the way they respond. I always tell people, remember, when you're doing an online conversation with somebody, it's basically like shouting at each other. You're not trying to convince the person you're talking to. You're actually using them as a way to speak to all the onlookers. The more reasonable you appear, and this is a really good jiu-jitsu tool, the more reasonable you appear, the person who's arguing with you, they will get madder and madder and get crazier in their responses. And you just come back with very reasonable, reasoned things. You don't call them names. And they get madder and madder. And to onlookers, they look like the crazy person. And you look like the reasonable, rational person. You're the gun owner who's simply saying, well, these are actually the stats and this is actually the information. And you let the other side look crazy. And if I think really for our Truth Squad now, we could do well just to have our side understand that a reasonable, rational, not mad, not crazy response is the secret sauce. That really is what works.
Well put. Well put. And I think one of the reasons some of us freeze up a little bit before we engage in that kind of contest is maybe we're not sure that we're correct about our facts. And we think we're going to get called out for saying it was the Gun Control Act of 58 instead of 68, or, that we're going to make a factual error and we're going to look like idiots. So how do we get past that? Can we have these arguments without that level of specificity that might open us up to making errors?
You can, but the information is very much available. I mean, heavens, now we can do a Google search, a search on DuckDuckGo, whatever you use. You get, hey, look, you can go on X or Twitter, ask me. I am at Gun Talk there. Just at Gun Talk.
There you go.
Ask me. Look, say, hey, somebody said this or pointed out, what would be the right response? And I say, well, look, this is the information, and it's all there, and it's not hidden. It's easy to find these days. I would say that maybe the technique for responding to people often would be when somebody says something outrageous, you could start off, you could say, for instance, I can understand how you might believe that because that's been repeated so often. But the reality is, and then you go on, it's kind of you'll see the politicians do it a lot. I call it the bump and run, where they'll say, well, that's a very important point, and they switch to this thing over there. And we're always saying, well, they never actually answered the question. Well, they weren't there to answer the question. They were there to make their points. Don't get distracted by but what about? If you like guns and you want to see children being murdered, don't take that bait. You can just say, well, that's of course ridiculous because gun owners are obviously one of the most responsible and law-abiding group of people out there. We know that people who have concealed carry permits, for instance, commit crimes at a rate of roughly 1% of the general population. That's from the Department of Law Enforcement in Florida, where they did the studies. And in every state where they pass concealed carry laws, people who get the permits rarely commit violent crimes. It's just almost unheard of. And you just kind of point out the information. But if you start off with, well, I can understand how you might feel that way because that's been reported erroneously, unfortunately. But here's the actual information.
Nicely done. That's some priceless coaching, and it inspires me. So, kind of going back in time, I'd like to get a sense of the political atmosphere that was preceding. And really, you had the Brady Law in '93, and then you had the Clinton weapon ban in '94. And so we hear that phrase, the assault weapon ban. I mean, over and over, and we tend to remember that many of us, as the first big incursion, which I don't really think that that's right, because there were trade-offs to get the Firearms Owner Protection Act,
Yes, there were.
that got into what, silencers and machine guns in private citizens' hands, and before, later wasn't there some trade-off with, I believe it was I'm going to goof this up because I don't have it written down, but the thing that manufacturers couldn't be sued, that, and so there's been some give and take back.
Right, we had the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. They call it PLACA.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
There always are trade-offs.
Yeah,
but politics is about trade-offs. You never get everything you want. And one of the things that I have seen, and look, for all the problems that the NRA has had over the last 5, 6, 7 years with their leadership, fortunately, I think mostly fixed now. But one of the things that people missed a lot of times is they said, well, the NRA didn't do this, or the NRA didn't do that. So I have several responses. One is, well, then what did you do? What? Why are you counting on somebody else to do it? Did you contact your congressman or senator? Did you call them? Did you write letters? Did you go see them when they came to town halls? Well, no, I'm busy. Typical response, I'm busy, I have a job. Guess what? Everybody's busy, everybody has a job, and everybody has exactly 24 hours in a day. If you don't show up, you're telling people it's not important. I'm sorry, if you don't show up, you're telling people it's not important. Simple as that. And the world belongs to those who show up.
I think you're right. There's a little bit of tough love from Tom, but you make
I haven't gotten tough love yet. Get off your ass and get moving. How about that?
I'll talk to you tomorrow. I got to go do something. But the other thing is we focus, say, on those big legislative things like the Clinton gun ban and there's been some highlight legislation that cut in pretty bad. But I think that sometimes we miss, and I think that you're also a master of this, some of those behind-the-scenes preventative work, even things that led up to the Supreme Court decision in District of Columbia v. Heller, and that started a little landslide that goes to some of those victories that you've talked about. Can you give us a high-angle view of what happens outside of legislation? What goes on behind the scenes that doesn't make the headlines?
How they talk about watching the sausage being made. I watched some experts at a state legislature do this, and it was educational for me. For instance, we had a committee meeting, and it was fairly evenly split on the members of the committee how they're going to vote. And the people on our side made sure there were several members on the committee. They were Democrats. They were going to vote against us on the gun issue, but they had their own bills on other issues completely, not related. And we made sure that there was going to be a vote called in the committee on their bill in another room while we were having this hearing, and they had to excuse themselves for 5 minutes to go to the other room. The moment they left the room, we called the question, and we got our bill passed. That's how the sausage gets made. That's how stuff happens. And you can show up and shout and rant and rave and all that, but the real work has been done before we walk into the room. The decisions have been made and the stuff is going on. Who's doing that work? And here's where we get to the heart of the matter. Your state gun rights organization. Everybody must belong and donate to their state gun rights organization. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the stuff's getting done. Often, it's getting done by not having bills come up at all, by having the right bills be introduced, by getting them introduced into this committee and not that committee, and knowing how that happens. Things that I don't know because I'm not working there all the time, but the people in your state gun rights group do. That's what they do. And people say, well, I belong to Gun Owners of America or Second Amendment Foundation. That's all good. And we need to do that. But you got to be taking care of your state group as well. And they'll say, well, I live in Montana. We don't have that problem. Yes, you do. Trust me. The gun ban lobby is handing bills to legislators in your state to try to get them introduced every single year. And you got to be vigilant in fighting them. The other thing talk about vigilant. The other thing your state group will do for you is let you know what's going on, because none of us can actually know what they're doing all the time there.
Yeah, especially given that behind-the-scenes process. And you might as well, when reading from my notes that I was going to ask questions off of, because one of the things I was going to ask you is whether you felt like the battle had now really moved to the state level. I mean, red flag laws, magazine capacity restrictions, outright bans on certain kinds of guns. And what's this new thing out of Colorado, having to have a training certificate? I mean, it's literally a FOID card as far as I can see before you can buy a semi-auto. And you know, then there's folks who will say, well, that's blatantly unconstitutional. That'll be overturned. But do we labor under it 3, 5, 10 years before they grant cert on it?
It's a great question. A lot of the battles have moved to the state level because they can't get anything through Congress. They used to be able to pass laws in Congress, gun control laws. They can't get those done anymore. Mm-hmm. So now they're moving into states to get them passed there, state by state by state, and they're getting it done. They're actually being successful at that. And we'd like to say, well, you know, the Supreme Court's going to rule and make all those go away. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. We don't know. We've been trying to get the Snopes case granted cert on that, the ban on semi-automatics with the Ocean State Tactical case. We're trying to get the Supreme Court to take that one. That's the ban on standard capacity magazines. 7 times in one case, 8 times in the other case, they have decided to shove it down the road, not grant cert to take the case, but not deny it either. It's in limbo. So we don't know what's going on. I would love to say, boy, the Supreme Court could take these cases and make all these state bans go away, and maybe they will, but we still have to fight the state battles. And to your point, because otherwise, if they pass these laws, these bans in these states, and we start challenging them in the courts, it can be 7, 8, 9 years. And and we don't know what the makeup of the Supreme Court's going to be then, do we?
No, we don't. And we don't know what can happen during that ensuing time. I mean, let's say that it was a background, heavy-handed background check, and we don't know who's maybe going to need a gun in a, household fraught with violence that can't get one. I mean, there's all kinds of lives are lost under these things.
That's a good point.
Really
lives are lost. It's like waiting periods. Lives are lost while particularly women are waiting to get the okay, and they've decided to buy a gun because their lives are in danger, and somebody says, but you have to wait 10 days. And the woman says, no, he's coming back tonight to kill me. That's the reality.
Yeah, and I have nowhere else to go or whatever. Well, it's really disturbing. And, you mentioned the Trump presidency, and the first one felt like just kind of a collective sigh of relief and a chance to retrench. And I'm not so sure that this time around I'm feeling such a profound sense of reprieve. I'm anxious. It seems a lot more tenuous this time. And I guess I'm curious about your take on gun rights for the foreseeable future. Where are the fights going to be?
Everywhere is the answer. The fights are going to be everywhere. They're going to be local, state, and federal. They're going to be in Congress. They're going to be in the courts. They're going to be in the appellate courts. They're going to be in the Supreme Court. Most certainly, we're going to have more cases going to the Supreme Court. I'm feeling cautiously optimistic, if you will. Okay. I think we're going to do good things. We're 50 days into the Trump presidency right now, the second. He is a different person. I am, weirdly enough, very glad that he did not win re-election the first time.
That is weird.
Because he would not have been ready for it. He was not ready for it the first time. Okay. He is a much tougher person now, much more determined. And he now fully understands how much the deep state stabbed him in the back, including Republicans. The bureaucrats just said, we're here to help you, and then did everything they could do to sabotage him. And that's why you now have this cabinet of people who keep saying, well, they've never held positions like that before. That's right. We don't want people who've held positions like that before, because they're the problem. So I am very optimistic about his ability and determination and drive. The question is going to be how much the Republicans try to block him, because we know the Democrats are going to. But look, the reality is, and nobody wants to talk about this, we have Republicans who have been making billions of dollars off of graft. They don't want the system to stop. We know the Democrats have been doing it. They've been funding their own campaigns through backdoor money laundering campaigns to the money comes out of USAID to an NGO, to another NGO, to another NGO, who makes a contribution to somebody's election campaign. So the Democrats have been using that, but I'm not sure the Republicans, a lot of Republicans haven't been doing the same thing. So they're going to be a problem.
I was going to say, yeah, there's plenty of guilt to go around on both sides.
Without a doubt. So it's going to be a battle. We have a real problem with the media carrying the water for the Democrats. But, now we, as we like to say, we are the media. You are the media. I am the media. Every person out there has a voice now. Now, maybe you have 3 people following you on Facebook or Twitter, but you have 3 people. You can talk to people. Each of us has a megaphone. Some megaphones are larger than others. We've got to be smart about how we use those megaphones and try not to look stupid. Because when we, the gun-owning public, say things that are stupid or say things that are outrageous or say things, frankly, that frighten the public, then we're doing harm to our cause.
Absolutely. How do we shut down those who may not be as careful in what they say, but we're still wearing the shirt with the same slogan? I've always wondered. I mean, I don't want to be the one who says, "Go away, don't be here," and yet, as you said.
It's the reality of it. I don't know that you can, or do we even need to try to engage people to say, look, just stop that. Often they are their own worst enemies. I mean, they hurt us. The folks on our side who are saying outrageous things, a lot of times they just want somebody to pay attention to them. And so if we don't pay attention to them, we don't feed them. We don't give them a platform. So just ignore them. I think ignoring people robs them of their outreach, but also it drives them crazy, and that's kind of fun too. Yeah, that's right. Just ignore them to death. It's just an amazing thing, right? Or if you just can't help yourself and you got to respond, just give them a very heartfelt, well, bless your heart. That's it. Love you, man. Appreciate you more than you will ever know. And then you bump and run and move on to make it a good point here. You know what?
Well, you're a Southern man from your roots. So.
We could use more. We don't do it enough. And it plays right into what you and I do, which is telling the public more about self-defense gun uses. It's a message that doesn't get out. The media doesn't cover it. The public doesn't know about it. The public doesn't think that people ever use guns to save their own lives or save other people. Now we have access to this information much more than we ever did before. We can find these stories. We can publicize them. And that's something you can put on your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, and all the rest of it. You can share those stories. You can set up. Google has a feature, like the old clipping service, where you'd get somebody would clip out newspaper stories. They call them Google Alerts. And you tell them, search for self-defense gun uses. And then once a day, you will get fed all the news stories about self-defense gun uses. Now you have the links to the stories of people who actually save themselves and other people, and you can start sharing that. The public goes, wow, I didn't realize that so many people are using guns to save lives. Real people, good people like you and me.
If you were to write a blueprint, a planning document on how to advance Second Amendment rights going forward, what would it look like?
That's a variation of if somebody would give me $100 million, what would you do with it?
Would you take 10 million?
I would take 10. Shoot, I would take whatever it takes and go with it. I would like to form a university, if you would, an outreach training program for our people to do better media. Because our people are not very good at it. Just are not. There are certain techniques that you can learn. It's like saying, I'm not a good shot. Okay, Gil and I will take you out, and in a day, we'll make them a good shot, right? Because we know how to teach that. There are people who know how to teach you to be good at media, to be good at public speaking, to be good at being interviewed. The bump and run is a great technique. Somebody's asking you a question, you go, typically they'll go, well, how do you feel about children getting access to guns? All right, it's a gotcha question, right? But if you're prepared for it, you go, well, all of us are concerned about that. And it's one of the reasons that we have been working so hard and so successfully to tackle that issue. Boom, go to where you want to go. All right, here's the technique. Somebody asks you a question, you start answering it, and you find yourself having gone down a place you don't want to go. This actually works better on recorded interviews. And almost all of them are recorded. Almost none of them are live. And you realize, man, I have talked myself into a corner and I need to stop and get out of this. And don't keep pushing forward. Stop in the middle of the sentence. Just stop talking and go, I'm sorry, I lost my thought. Could you ask me that question again?
Oh, really?
Take another
Just
swing at it.
redirect.
Make them throw you the pitch again. Take another swing. Just stop. They're not going to be able to just say, oh, I'm sorry, I lost my thought. Could you ask me that question again, please? And
That's
and
pretty
they'll
honest.
throw it to you again, and now you do a better job second time. It's a technique. And that my point is, it's like if I'm talking grip, sights, and trigger, and I'm going to teach you how to do that, I can teach you how to do the interview well as well. And so that would be one of the things I would do. I would, thinking about outreach. Look, the reality is, if this is the needle and it's straight up on public opinion, if we can move it about that much, we win. Give me 2 ticks on public opinion and we win.
Wow.
It is that tight.
It's that tight.
The public has a terrible misunderstanding about guns. One of the problems is people on our side don't understand this. They don't believe it or they don't understand it. They don't understand that for millions of people, guns mean crime, period. Guns mean crime. That's the only thing that guns are ever used for, because it's the only thing they've ever heard of. Yeah, so trying to push back on that, that's a media play to some extent, but there are smart ways to do it. It would take a lot of money to do this. When you have Bloomberg money, millions of dollars, and now we're finding out that this $400 billion being sent on USAID has been sent to NGOs,
Yes.
and you know what? They've actually been sending it back to Everytown for Gun Safety, Giffords. They're using our U.S. tax dollars to fund it back into the gun control groups to lobby us, the public, as well as the legislators. And so we're fighting using our dollars to fight our dollars. So it really isn't the Bloombergs as much as we thought it was, as them stealing the money from us and using it to push gun control.
Yeah.
But, they take that money, and they're actually pretty savvy. They can hire really good advertising agencies and really good PR agencies and perfect the messaging really well. And I would love for us to be able to do that. It used to be the NRA could do some of that. The organization simply got raped by the people who were in charge and took the money, and membership is down by half, and the donations are down by half, and that's got to come back because, look, as good as Second Amendment Foundation and Firearms Policy Coalition and Gun Owners of America and these groups are, None of them are nearly as large or as impressive or effective as the NRA has been and can be again. We all need a good, strong NRA, and I think it's coming back. It's going to be up to each person to figure out when he or she says, okay, I'll come back in now. You guys really, you irritated me. I'm going to be kind about this. I'm PO'd, okay? But at a certain point, you got to go, okay, right. I'm going to get over myself and my righteous indignation, and it makes me feel good to be angry. By the way, it does. People love to feel angry about things. But at a certain point, you got to say, how do we win? That's the other part. A lot of our people,
right.
See if I can say this so it makes sense. A lot of our people would really rather fight than win. They love the fight.
Well, there's always been that balance. Both sides benefit by having a battle on their hands. So is there a reason? Is there enough motivation to win?
Another question. Yeah, exactly. And some of the groups, I don't have to name them, but there are gun groups that love to go F you, F you, F you. And that is not persuasive to the general public, other than to convincing them that we're crazy and uncouth, and they really don't want us to have guns, people who would behave that way. But it is effective at getting money. It is effective at saying, we're the only no compromise group, that yada, yada, yada. You know, you give us money because we'll fight for you. We're not actually effective at anything, but we'll fight for you. We're actually fighting to get your dollars in our pockets. That's what's a lot of what's going on. So just be aware who's actually able to persuade the public, because that's the battle. It is the beginning and the end of how we win. When you get public opinion on your side, you win. And people say, well, we'll always have the Second Amendment. No, you won't. No, you won't. If you lose public opinion enough, you lose the Second Amendment. And I think maybe some people don't fully understand or appreciate that.
Well, that's a frightening, a frightening possibility. So I'd love to launch Media University. You get to be the college dean.
Oh, trust me, we would not have on-campus riots.
No, the protest would be of a different nature.
You could complain about the score you got at the match last week, but that's about it.
I get it. We do all have a bullhorn, and that was a great reminder that in today's way of doing things, we replaced the letter to the editor, but now more of us can get it published. So that was a really good point. What's the bottom line for getting this done?
Each person has to get up every day. If you're serious about this, if this is an important part of your life and you think this is how we support the country, each person has to get up and say, what am I going to do today? Not what's the NRA going to do, or what's Tom going to do, what's Gila going to do. What am I going to do today? Just one thing today to help the Second Amendment, to further gun rights, to make people safer with their guns, become a firearms instructor, take people shooting, introduce people to the shooting sports. I call it vaccinating people. That is, people, if somebody's been to the range and shot and said, man, that was fun, I had a good time, and those people are really having fun, and they were actually very kind and welcoming and helpful to me, no one can ever convince that person after that gun owners are bad and evil and fascist and mean and, Nazis and all the other things that we get called, because they'll say, well, that was not my experience. So you take them to the range, you introduce them. I have had several people from the LBGT community tell me, I like to shoot, but it's almost like they whisper, but, I was told not to hang around with the gun people because you know how they are. And then I went to the range and everybody said, come on out, let's go shooting. It's like, they all said, yes, of course, we've known you were gay for years. We don't care. We just don't care. Are you safe with guns? Are you having fun? End of story. Let's go shoot. The more welcoming we are, the better off we are. The more people we can introduce to shooting. That's kind of our secret weapon. We forget, honestly, we take it for granted. Shooting's fun. You take somebody out and they have fun. fun. They hit a target and they turn around the first time they go, can I do it some more? And you go, yes. You keep shooting. I'll keep loading. You can shoot all the ammo I brought. It's great. If you're having fun, we're going to make this happen for you. You have won that person over. Well, back to your question, what can we each do? We can each say, I'm going to take people shooting. I'm going to become a firearms instructor. Or I'm just going to do it informally. I'm going to make it a point so that when I call my senator's office, they'll say, oh, hi, Tom, without me introducing myself. They know my voice. Always friendly, always appreciative, always respectful of their time. Hi, just wanted to make sure the senator knows that we've got this bill coming up, and I would really appreciate it if she would vote against that. That's it. In the message, once a week, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. There's another thing we can do, and this one can be kind of fun if you go about the right way. We gun owners tend to be the leave me alone, I don't join groups, I don't want to tell people what to do kind of people. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we will get together with our shooting buddies. So how about getting together with your shooting buddies and saying, whenever they have the city council meeting, we're going to go. And we're going to go to dinner first, and we're going to go to the city council meeting. We're going to sit in the back, and we're going to make them nervous because we're not going to say anything. And the first time, they won't notice us. The second time, they're going to go, huh. The third time, they're going to go, who are those people back there? And because we're watching them. Same goes for school board meetings.
Yeah.
Simply put, you can tell people what's important to you, but it's almost always a lie. Because the only thing that's important to you is what you will spend time on. We all have different amounts of money. Oh, my. We all have the same amount of time. Mm-hmm. If you won't put your time on it, it's not important to you, and you're just blowing smoke.
There's some sobering, tough love from
It
Tom.
really is as simple as that,
Yeah.
You think about it.
Yeah.
What will I spend? The most valuable thing we each have is our time. What will I spend that valuable resource on? Do we really need to watch? Yeah, do we really need to watch more reruns of Beverly Hillbillies? I mean, come on.
No.
Not even
that. Not even
well,
Star
Trek. I don't know, maybe. That's it.
Some of those uniforms. Wow. Oh, my goodness. This has been fascinating, and it just underscores for me the way you inspire us. You inspire us every time you do the show. And one of the things that I found so useful is as things have become more internet centric, it's very rare that I'm able to listen to the radio at the time that your show is on. But the archiving to podcast has really changed that paradigm for me. And so I'm wondering, for network members who maybe haven't been taking advantage of that weekly inspiration shot, how do they find out about it?
It's really easy. I'm glad you mentioned that because it is a radio show. It runs on 270 radio stations around the country, and it runs live, most of them. But it then becomes a podcast, which is, I call it a DVR for audio, if you will. You can listen to it anytime you want, and you can go back and listen to years and years and years worth. Anywhere you get podcasts, just look for Gun Talk. And it's on Spotify and YouTube and iTunes and all the other podcasting platforms. If you don't do podcasts, that's okay. You go to YouTube. Look for Gun Talk there. We have not only my show, we have two, maybe three other podcasts that we do now, coming out of our studios down in Louisiana with Ryan and KJ and Chris Cerrito and the people there who do a fabulous job. You can listen at your own convenience. A lot of people download the podcast and they listen to it in their cars, either as they're commuting or going places. Do you?
That's where I hear you. Yep.
So, it's fun. One thing about podcasts is you don't get to call in. And I would just offer this, because it is live, during the show on Sunday afternoons, you can call the show. Tom Talk Gun is the number. Pretty easy to remember. Tom Talk Gun. And if you have a question, a comment, or if you think I'm full of it, that's fine. We'll have that conversation too. I'll give you the floor. We can, you tell me why. And, I'll ask you to, solidify your position, to support your argument. you know, but I'm not going to cut you off or shout you down. That's just not the kind of show we have.
I'm just so grateful for those 30 years of Gun Talk. It sounds kind of corny to say that, but it's brought us along and it's kept us engaged, and it's such a great mix of fun and hunting and pro-gun politics. The last one that I listened to, you were talking about take that shot when you've got the crosshairs on the animal. Don't try to perfect it. And you know what? I'm going to hear your voice at some point. At some point, your voice is going to be in my head. I'm going to say, Tom said.
How many times have you taught somebody ignore the wobble on the sights, right? Just keep pressing the trigger, because if you try to make it perfect and line everything up and snatch the trigger, you're going to pull it off target. You've taught that to so many people.
Yep.
It's the exact same thing. The enemy of good is an attempt at perfect.
Yes, and you know what? That applies across the board in life. Am I going to wait to comment on this fractious issue until I've got the perfect thing to say? No, I probably better just come up and say, well, in my opinion and my experience,
right?
You know, so on and so forth. It's great.
Take the shot is actually a pretty good phrase to use for an awful lot of the things we do in life. Don't put it off. Don't procrastinate. Get it done. And if you didn't do it great today, learn from it and go do it better tomorrow.
So very true. Tom, you inspire me. Thank you so much for being
It's a pleasure.
who you are.
And I so value your friendship and your counsel through all the years.